Hey, good morning guys, I'm the Tech Prepper, hope you're all doing well. So today we're going to take a look at the Bulletin Board System, or the BBS, and how to access it over packet radio. That's right, no cell phone, no internet, none of that stuff. But the purpose is for emergency communication, for sharing information that is applicable to your local community. So very close in range here. And this is a technology that has been long in past for the last 25 to 30 years. It started to die off during the dial-up internet revolution of the mid-90s, but I have found that with everything that's going on with government oversight and corporate interest not respecting you as the actual consumer but turning you into the product, systems like this will give us back as civilians the internet we've always wanted, or what we were used to in the early days. And I spent the last 5 months setting one up, running one, learning a lot, and I want to share with you that entire experience. So I'm not the expert, but living and breathing this has given me a different perspective. Now, I also want to have this video be something I can personally refer back to several years from now if I step out of the hobby. So we're going to start with first principles, what a BBS is, why we want to use it, how to find one, what kind of gear you need to connect to one, how to interact with it. So lots of references. And then I want to close with my system, TTPBBS, how I have it deployed, how I ran things initially, some changes I made, and ultimately where I landed, because I want this to be a tool for my community and I don't want it to be more complicated than need be. So long videos, so there'll be chapter markers down below. Anyways, guys, there'll be a little bit of nostalgia here, especially for you guys that remember the old good old days of dial-up computing. So stick around and let's get right into the BBS. All right, before we get going into the digital version of the bulletin board system, let's take a look at a physical manifestation, a push-pin style bulletin board. I grew up in the 80s, 90s, and went to school or college in 2000, and these were very popular. When I was a kid, we had them in our local church, the hallways in our school, and while I was at the university, we had 3 of these in particular. We had one in the central quad that was relevant to the entire campus. Each department, engineering, mathematics, physics, etc., had one that was specific to their needs, and then we had one in each of the dorms, and you could tailor the information specifically for each one of those communities. So that is really key. And the type of information that we would find there, at least when I was at the university, was items for sale like books. Books were very expensive even back then. I think they were somewhere between $200 to $300 for the real thick engineering books. And people would put their thumbtacks up here, post their item for sale, and then you would rip off a phone number and give them a call and arrange a sale. So not too different than Facebook Marketplace, but completely offline and analog system. Events, we did a MCOM Tools R4 Install Fest last year, and we posted that along with the after action report on the bulletin board. So regardless of what you put up here, the bottom line is that it was a place to share information for your community that was very specific and catered to their needs. Heck, I'm hiring right now for a front-end developer. I wish people would walk across this bulletin board and have one of the front-end React developers give me a jingle. But anyways, you get the point. So let's take a look at how this translates to the digital world 30 years ago. So in 1978, the first computerized bulletin board system was created. In fact, it was called exactly that, Computerized Bulletin Board System, or CBBS for short. And it was developed by the late Ward Christensen and also the late Randy Seuss. Now, it's interesting how projects like this come together. These guys were part of a computer club, and Chicago at that time was experiencing a very bad snowstorm. And they were unable to do a few things: meet with their local community and exchange things like software and programs. So they needed a platform to support that information passing and sharing that could potentially take place digitally. So I have here from 1992, this is a archive from a BBS that is between Ward Christensen and someone asking about the creation of the BBS. And he says, why did you create the BBS? And Ward comes back with 4 things. Number 1, I had an extra computer. 2, Hayes came out with an internal modem. 3, I had a phone line. And number 4, there was a terrible snowstorm on January 16th, 1978. And he goes on to say that, quote, I patterned the software after the Cork Board and push pin style of Bulletin Board and coined the term BBS, and that's how it was born. On February 16th, 1978, this finally went live. So not too bad for a month of actual development. Now, the basic building blocks for running a BBS and connecting to it have not really changed throughout that whole personal computing and dial-up era. You just needed a handful of things: a personal computer, some software to access that system, a modem, and a plain old telephone line. And what was interesting about the telephone line in particular was that those telephone numbers for operators running the BBS were typically found in local communities at computer stores, bookstores, and they were just listings that were printed out with the telephone number and the name of the bulletin board. And the great thing about these bulletin boards is that the people hosting them gave it their own creative flair and really made it their own, and brought in their own community of users and wanted to engage with that community. And they used it as a place to exchange ideas, exchange software, sometimes illegal. There was something called the Wares scene. And but the bulletins and the inter-user messaging was really key at that time. And the fact that you were dialing in with a telephone is significant because at that time, the area code that you're in pretty much dictated the cost of being able to connect to another system on a per minute basis. So in general, most people did not or could not afford the long distance charges by dialing out of their county or out of their state. So the bulletin boards seem to be fairly localized to specific pockets throughout the world, and they cater to those needs. So in the case of Ward Christensen and Randy Seuss, their goal was to exchange software that they would normally do in person at a club event, but now they were able to do it virtually over a plain old telephone line and their modems. So this is going to be very key into what we want to do today as individuals concerned about emergency preparedness. At roughly the same time, amateur radio operators took to the air and made 2 changes to this basic setup. Number 1, they took that plain old telephone line and swapped that out with their amateur radio. And number 2, they took that modem and replaced that with something called a TNC or terminal node controller. Now, to set off the whole packet radio scene, at least here in Arizona, there was the birth of something called TAPR, or the Tucson Amateur Packet Radio Corporation, and they started producing TNC kits for assembly by amateur radio operators. And that resulted in packet radio just taking off. And at that time, operators would take this equipment and deploy something called a node or a station. And the great thing about it is that the packet technology over radio allowed for something called packet switching. And you could take a piece of information and it can go from one node to another node to another node, and so on. We're going to explore this in detail in this video. So don't want to make this overly complicated, but when I talk about packet radio and packet switching, all we're talking about is something that takes this very simple example. Let's say that my station or my packet node wants to be able to send a message to my friend Brian WN7D, who also has the same type of equipment. He has a packet node as well. And the message I want to send is somewhat large. So what the system does, it'll take that overall message and break it up into individual pieces called packets, and it'll send those packets one at a time, and the other station will reassemble those until they get the full message. Now, if there are issues where a packet isn't received, the system allows for retransmission of those packets. Now, at this time in the 80s, the entire state of Arizona, like other portions of the country, were fully connected using this switching network topology over radio. So no government intervention, no corporate interest whatsoever at this time. And I found this article that I believe may have been written in the early to mid 90s by a ham who has, by a silent key actually. And it's entitled Arizona Packet Radio Past, Present, and Future. And by the present, he's referring to the mid 90s and the death of packet radio because of the proliferation of dial-up networking. And this is a great read. It actually gives you a good picture of the landscape at that time. But he talks a little bit about the bulletin board scene as well here in Arizona. And he says, the Phoenix area had so much activity that at one point there were a total of 6 full-time, full-service BBSs. Each of the BBS operators claimed stake on a portion of the user share by offering multiple frequency access, which included HF, VHF, MVHF, and UHF. The strain on the networks from BBS forwarding forced BBS and network operators to begin working hand in hand. So it was so popular that they had to start coordinating because of the amount of congestion of all of these packets flying around. Bottom line is, this technology is still possible today, has more value, I believe, more than any time, even at this time, just based on where we're going with AI. Anyways, we're not going to go into end of the world technology rant here, but suffice to say that the packet radio platform allows for us to layer on an application on top of it, like the bulletin board system. So let's go ahead and quickly jump into a 101 demo of how to connect to a BBS and a bunch of different capabilities, as well as the commands. And stick around, like I said, this is long, so check out for those chapter markers down below. For our first demo, we're going to start with my favorite setup for 2025 because it is the most simple. And we're still going to need the same 4 basic components, but instead of a computer, we're going to use my iPhone. For the software, we're going to use a new piece of software, an app that has just been written for the iPhone that is still in the closed beta, but should be out soon, called Packet Commander. And it is written by George, the creator of Radio Mail. This is a radio terminal application that is needed to connect from my system to a remote packet node. And then 3 and 4, we're going to need a radio and a TNC. And for 2025, I prefer to have something that's all in one. This is the BTEC UV Pro. It's a dual band radio, but it has a built-in Bluetooth accessible TNC, so the radio and the phone talk together. The first thing we need to do is turn on our radio. Next, we want to launch our radio terminal program, Packet Commander. And you're going to need 2 pieces of information regardless of which hardware, software you use to connect to a packet node. For this example, we'll connect to my packet node. And what we want to do is click the plus symbol at the bottom here. For the call sign, we'll put in my call sign, which is KT7RUN. And then there's typically a station identifier, so you'll add a hyphen, and then in my case, the number 7. And then you need to know which frequency that packet node is listening on. We'll get into how to discover these a little bit later. In my area, I've settled on using 145.710 because there is packet activity there. And then for the name, we'll just put in TTPBBS and save. Under the settings here, you have the ability to pair a Bluetooth TNC, and you can already see here we should have the UV Pro come up. Yep. So we're good to go. So very simple application, very modern, perfect for 2025. So now we'll just click on KT7RUN-7. We have a few options here, but right now we're just going to connect over simplex or just direct from this station to my other packet node and click connect. And the nice thing about the Packet Commander application and Bluetooth is that it also sets the frequency for you, so I don't have to look. And you'll see here that I'm greeted with a message. I'm running the Lin BPQ node software on the system we're connected to, and I've customized it to my needs. One of the first things you might want to do when you get to a packet node is understand the commands that are available. And for that, we'll go ahead and click the question mark and hit enter. And you can see there at the bottom, we have a list of all the commands. I have BBS, chat, RMS, wiki. I have a lot of applications that I'm running on my node, and a lot of them are custom. I'll cover that in one of my nerd hours on the Buy Me a Coffee side for the members. But the ones that are supported out of the box with something like Lin BPQ by John Wiseman are BBS and chat. We're going to mostly be focused on the BBS application on this packet node. So to access that now, we'll just go ahead and type in BBS, and it's not case sensitive, so I can use lowercase or uppercase, hit enter. And now we're connected to the BBS. So at this point, we can do a number of operations and commands here, but we're going to go ahead and reserve that for a computer just to make things easier. But the reason why I want to show this first is that this is perhaps the easiest, simplest configuration. You're already carrying a phone. Most amateur radio operators already carry a radio. In fact, I go trail running just about every day and do a hike once every single weekend. And this is what I take with me and the pup. And the nice thing again about the Packet Commander integration is that I have my radio chest mounted in my chest rig. I just turn it on, don't even look. I can go run, and it's really quite nice for me to go and be able to do a few things. I can check my messages, check bulletins, download files, upload files, and leverage all of the capabilities on the BBS. So stick around and let's see what those capabilities are. If you're an Android user, I did not leave you guys behind. In fact, I've already done a video with the BTEC UV Pro, the Bluetooth TNC, and using an Android device with an application called WODE or WinLink on Android. That application actually does support a terminal, and we went through a BBS connection on that video. For this next demo, we're going to change things up just a little bit, but we're going to have the same 4 basic components to be able to connect to a packet node. Number 1, we're going to use a computer instead of an iPhone, and for the radio terminal application, we're going to use one that runs under Linux and a few other platforms called Qt Term or Qt Term TCP by John Wiseman. And then for the radio, we're going to use my dumb FT60 handheld radio. That brings us to the TNC or terminal node controller. Unfortunately, I came into the hobby very late. I've only been doing this for about 5 years. And at that time, hardware-based TNCs really stopped being deployed, and they were swapped out by a more simple approach of using a sound card that could talk to the radio and also key the radio's transmitter, and then it would delegate to a software-based TNC. And we're using something called Direwolf. Now, at that time, 5 years ago, when I got into the hobby, the SignalLink USB was the de facto standard. It had a sound card that it presented to the computer when you plugged in the USB cable. It had a couple of these modules that you would plug in based on which radio you wanted to connect to it, and then you would have a special cable for whatever radio you had. And I use this on just about every digital mode out there, and even have done some portable operations with it. Well, in the last couple years, DigiRig came out on the scene. I absolutely love those guys. First with the DigiRig Mobile, but these days I am standardizing on the DigiRig Lite, which I've done videos on, and it's actually pretty similar to the SignalLink USB. It is a USB sound card, and it has a Vox circuit, a voice activated circuit. So when there is audio going out, it will key the transmitter. And then you do need, similar to the SignalLink, you do need a special 3.5 millimeter cable that works with your radio. So we're going to use all of these things to connect to my packet node again, and we're definitely going to explore some more commands. Since we have all the components, we're ready to get going with the demo. The first thing we want to do is take our FT60 and turn it on. We also want to make sure we set it to the packet frequency since there is no cat control. And then one thing we need to do with this radio is we want to open up the squelch all the way so all the packets can actually be properly received. It'll sound something like this. So what I want to do then is plug in my interface cable to the DigiRig, the 3.5 millimeter jack, and then open up the squelch all the way. And then for the volume tube, we want to make sure, at least on an FT60, that it's at the right level. Typically for me, it's about the 11 o'clock position. Now, I'm running Linux, and getting Direwolf up and running is a little bit of a nerd task and requires a special configuration, special software. I've encapsulated all of that stuff into my MCOM Tools project, so we're going to use that as an example so we can actually show people how to use the BBS. So the first thing we want to do is open up our terminal here. And in MCOM Tools, all you have to do is type in ET radio. And this allows us to select the radio that we're about to plug in. And I like to use the general purpose DigiRig Lite. So for any radio that supports the DigiRig Lite, this is the one that you would select. And at that point now it's ready to accept the USB cable to be plugged in. And when we do this, it will do a variety of plug and play tasks for us, so we don't have to configure anything. Next up, we want to launch our radio terminal application. And in MCOM tools, I have a 0 config mode for QTerm TCP. We'll hit enter, and then we can select the baud rate. For VHF, we will be using 1200 baud packet. In fact, that's what my BBS supports. Hit OK. It's going to start the software-based TNC direwolf behind the scenes, and then it'll also launch the QTerm TCP terminal app. So at this point, I think everything should be good to go. We'll go to connect. And then what we want to put in the call to is the target node we want to connect to, just like before. We're going to use KT7RUN-7. Click OK. And if this works, we should have the radio key up here, and it looks like it's keying up, and it should be talking to that remote node. And just like before, we get the banner that we've logged in. Now we can run the standard question mark to get all the commands, but since we know those already, we won't do that. So let's go ahead and simulate what I typically do in a normal session every morning. I will type in BBS to access the BBS on this node, and it should come back to us with a welcome message, and it says, hello Gaston, latest message is 666. That sounds a little ominous. And from there, I'll go and do a few things. The first task I want to do and share with you is how to check bulletins that either the syshop post or other users post. So to do that, we'll type in LB Lima Bravo for list bulletins and hit enter. And the nice thing about this is it gives you, the posts that you put are going to be specific to your community. So we can take a look here, and we notice that we've got a few things. So right at the top, we had Brian, WN7D, had an update. Prior to that, on the 6th, he had some radio gear he had listed for sale. On the 5th, I had posted a weather report. We had some bad weather coming through here. I had another user talk about their experience with Packet Commander. So he connected from about 6 or 7 miles out using Packet Commander. So a variety of things. We also had like an internet outage the other day. We posted about that, and this has been done all over radio. So just in this list, we have about 4 different users that have contributed various posts. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to read one of those. And then along the left-hand side here, we have the message or bulletin number. I actually am curious on what Brian is selling. So that is message number 660. So we will type in R for read, and then that ID 660, and then press enter. And this will work on Packet Commander, it'll work on Wode, it'll work on the application I show you under Windows. So it looks like Brian didn't put very much here. He actually put C files section. So I think this is a good segue of another command. So linBPQ or BPQ32 supports the ability to upload and download files using a protocol called YAP. So the command for that is just type in files, and we will get a listing of all the files. Now, I have probably created about 80% of these, and then the other guys in the group have created a few themselves. So you can see here, I have come up with a very specific naming convention to make things easy. At the bottom here, it says abort continue. Press enter because there are more files coming. And you can see just for ease of use, I have opted to standardize on a file convention of putting the year, the 2-digit month, and the 2-digit day, and then having everybody put in a description. Notice how everything is lowercase, there are no spaces. This is just to make things easy. So we will copy that. And then there's a protocol called YAP. Not every application supports this, but Packet Commander does. It's actually phenomenal. You can send a file, define your receive directory. For us, it'll go into our downloads folder. And we can also upload a file. Okay, so we're going to type in YAP, Y-A-P-P, Yankee Alpha Papa Papa, and then the file name, and press enter. And if this works correctly, the radio will now ask the remote node for the file. You can see it says YAP receiving file. And then on here on the end, it's 724 bytes, so relatively small. And I wanted this section to be real time, mostly because I want you guys to get a sense for how long this takes. And then you can see here already reception of the file complete, and it shows you where that file was downloaded. So now we can go to our downloads folder, and we should have Brian's file right there. We can double click on it and you can see all of his goodies. Let's go ahead and see if we can open this up a bit more. So the point here is we're able to have people post bulletins, people contribute files, and rather than getting on the air and tying up a voice channel, we're able to effectively do this with a large community at their leisure. It's asynchronous. Brian did this a few days ago. I'm just looking at it now. So some other commands that are actually kind of interesting are the ability to, actually let's do a bulletin real quick before we move on. So if we want to post a bulletin, you want to do SB, so send bulletin, and then you pick a category. Typically on ours, we'll use all, or if I'm doing something for MCOM tools, I'll put ETC. So I'll put SB all. There'll be a packet exchange, and it's now asking me for a title, and I will put BBS 101 demo. And then it's going to ask me to enter in the content body for the post, and I'll put this is a live post for the YouTube machine. And you want to keep these somewhat small. You could do multi-line, for example, and I can hit enter again. I can put 73, comma, Gaston. But the key thing is you have to terminate the message. This goes back to, again, more than 30 years ago. So /EX is to terminate that. And now that bulletin is out there. So anybody else connecting, if they were to type in list bulletins, for example, they would see a new message ID and that new bulletin. So message number 667 is KT7RUN BBS 101 demo. We can also send personal messages. So instead of using SB for send bulletin, I can do SP for send private, and I'll send one to my buddy Brian. So I'll put his call sign, WN7D, and this will be stored on the remote packet node. And I'll put, hey, so I screwed up the title there. It's hey, comma, not a huge problem. Let's go ahead and end that. This is actually a good example. It's going to give us a message ID of 668. We can type in K for kill, and we can kill 668. So that has been removed. And I'm going to go ahead and try that one more time. We'll type in send private, and then we want to send it to WN70. That's the call sign. And I'm going to just put SP demo for YouTube. Hit enter. And I like to wait a little bit of time before I get the acknowledgement before typing again. And we can just put, again, this is a demo. And 73 Gaston. And just like when we prepared the bulletin, we're going to close with /EX to end it. Now, before we drop on this one, I also want to share with you a couple of things. If there are a lot of messages on the server and you don't want to get all of them, you can type in LL, 2 L's, Lima Lima, space, and the number of messages you want to get back. I'll put 5. So this is telling the system, send me the most recent 5 personal messages and or bulletins to me. So you can kind of see here, I got, this is the message that I sent Brian. This is the message I posted to everybody. And then I have a few housekeeping messages from the system since I'm a sysop. And then if I want, I can go ahead and, for example, it looks like there's also a new user that joined, KD7KDO. And again, we can just to round things out, do R664. We can read that. And the important thing here, guys, we also want to be able to gracefully disconnect so we're not tying up the system. And to do that, just hit the letter B as in Bravo and enter, and you will disconnect. So quick demo here on kind of what to expect in terms of the flow. Next up, we're going to do some more investigation, but we'll do it with a Windows machine and a Baofeng radio. For this last demo, we're going to take a look at Windows. So we'll be using my off-grid Windows 10 tablet for the computer. For the software to connect to the packet station, we'll be using a radio terminal program called EasyTerm. And then for the radio, we'll be using the Wang UV5R. And then for the TNC, we're going to be using, again, the combination of the DigiRig Lite plus a software-based TNC. And for this application, we're going to be using Sound Modem, which is also written by UZ7HO. Now, the first thing we want to do is make sure we turn on our radio and tune it to that packet frequency we want to connect to. I'm using 145.710. You're going to want to have the squelch open. So we'll plug this guy in. And I'm not a Windows guy, so I'm going to try my best here. I haven't used Windows since really the XP days. And we want to click on our sound properties here. And we want to make sure that the audio levels look good. So for playback, you want to make sure that your USB audio device is detected. I've renamed mine to DigiRig, and you also want to make sure that it's not set as the default device so that chimes from Windows don't trigger the push to talk. Under properties, we want to make sure we go to levels. I have my speaker set to 0 dB and I have my microphone muted. We have all of our enhancements disabled. And then for the recording for the DigiRig Lite, we want to make sure, again, we also don't have it marked as the default. And under properties, if we go to custom, you want to make sure you have AGC disabled, and we have our levels for the microphone set to 0 dB. Now, this is an air-gapped computer, so I have opted to download onto USB drive 3 different applications from the developer site. I'll put that link down below. But the first one we have here is EasyTerm 49, that's the radio terminal program. We have Sound Modem 114, and then we're also going to need the PTT DLL, and we're going to need to copy those into the Sound Modem folder here so that we can use that to key the transmitter. So let's go ahead and open up Sound Modem. Okay, so at this point, fairly straightforward. You want to make sure you have AFSK set to AX.25 1200 baud. I have hold pointers enabled. Under settings, you're going to want to go to devices, and then for the output and input device, you're going to want to make sure we have the DigiRig Lite device, those USB audio codecs selected. Now, to trigger the PTT, we want to make sure that we have select PTT port set to EXT, and then under advanced settings, you want to make sure you have the USB audio device selected. So at this point, the Sound Modem or the software-based TNC is all ready to go, so we will minimize that, and it should be decoding stuff it starts to see. The next thing we want to do is head on over to EasyTerm 49, open up the terminal.exe. Really straightforward. It's going to talk to that Sound Modem directly. We'll go to connect. You want to make sure for your call from, we put in your call sign. So mine is KT7RUN. And then for call to, that's the remote packet station. We've been using as an example my remote node, KT7RUN-7, and we want to click connect. So it looks like it's transmitting here, and we're actually already getting the BBS. So the cool thing about this is that this opens the Windows guys up to doing the same type of packet work. I'm not going to dive into everything here, but I do want to show you some cool things. There are other commands. So for example, when we did the question mark command, there were 2 commands I want to explore. The first one is called ports, and the other one is called mherd. We'll table that one for a second. But under ports here, we have the ability to list all of the communication ports that the server or the BBS or the node behind me offers. And today I'm actually supporting 3 on my node or packet node, and this could be different for everybody. And you'll notice I have one there for BBQ 145.710. That's the main one that we've connected to. We have Telnet for administrative purposes as the system administrator, and then we have, or I have, a third port for doing 300 baud packet over HF. And we're not going to get into that for this video. And what this allows us to do is there's a special command called C for connect. Then we can put the port number. Let's say that we want to, from this system, use the VHF port on the BBS. So we'll put in 1. Then we can put a remote call sign, another node. So I have another node, or there is a node that is out about 40 to 50 miles called TTPBBS. So we're logged into from this station to the station behind me. We're going to use its antenna, the one that is on port 1, and we're going to hop. We're going to literally jump to another machine right now, or another node, and this is where that packet switching network comes into play. So from this little HT, I'm able to tap into the 80 watt power behind me and its range, and we just made a connection 50 miles out. And you'll notice here, this is another BBS. It looks a little bit different from mine. They're running the KPC3, the Camtronics 3 here, and you can see they also have a number of commands. They do have a bulletin here, but you're able to type in help in this case here, and it'll list all of the commands. And they have a very similar feature set as Lin BPQ to allow you to list bulletins, read bulletins, do all kinds of stuff. So we are blessed here in the state of Arizona that we have a lot of packet infrastructure. So the point is, we can start to build these networks. So if more operators in my area start to stand up their own nodes like I have, we can jump from system to system. And this is actually how Arizona and other parts of the country were connected a couple decades back. So one other thing to keep in mind, I mentioned briefly that how do you discover these? What I like to do is head on over to the WinLink site, and they have a map there where you can look at all the WinLink RMS gateways. And if you click on the AX25 packet and zoom into your area, you should see a list of all of the WinLink packet nodes in your area. And I have found that in general, those frequencies tend to be watering holes for general purpose packet activities and packet nodes. So make a list of all of those frequencies you see. For example, my area, I've got 145.710, 145.010. And then if you launch a program like EasyTerm, there's this mHerd here, and it is listening to all of those packet stations beaconing, because per the FCC, they need to beacon every once in a while. And you can see since we started this session, I have 3 stations that I've heard, KT7RUN-7, which we connected to, KT7RUN-15, that's another service that I run, and KT7RUN-11. If we were to do the same thing when connected to my node, there's also a command called MH, and it would list everything it heard. So really great for discoverability. And guys, there's a lot to explore here, but I gave you the basics. And what I found here was a cheat sheet online. I'll link this below by Cheatography, and they have all of the Lin BBQ commands, so it should help you guys get going really easily. This is a long video, so let's jump behind me real quick and let's take a look at my setup for my node. And we'll probably spend a few more minutes and then call it a day. So at the heart is the radio. This is the Yaesu 2980R. It's an 80 watt rig, and yeah, I'm running it at 80 watts. And it's connected to an antenna on the roof, the Diamond X50A, that's about 25 feet above ground. And then you can see here we are set to 145.710. For the interface into the computer, instead of a TNC, I am running the DigiRig Mobile, and that is going into this tablet right here. This is the Panasonic FZ-M1. It's running a customized version of Ubuntu Linux that I call MCOM Tools, and it's running Direwolf as the software-based TNC, and then it's running the Lin BPQ software to provide the BBS. Now that is a little bit of a configuration hurdle to get over. So in MCOM Tools, I have created a 0 configuration setup that allows you to do a very basic setup like I did. So that may be a subject for a video in the future because it was no easy task. So really straightforward. I did have a power failure after about 150 days of this guy being on. In fact, it was docked on the Panasonic dock and it died, and overnight this battery ran out. So the one change that I made was I pulled the Lind Electronics 16 or 12 volt to 16 volt adapter out of my Jeep and connected that to this guy. So there is an internal battery here. It'll last for about 6 hours, but with that 12 volt to 16 volt converter, I have that now going into my 12 volt distribution block. And this 12 volt distribution block is powered by one of two power sources. When the grid is up, it's connected to this power supply that is supplying everything off of 110 AC mains. But let's say there's a power outage and that is dead. We have now just automatically cut over to battery backup using the PowerWorks Epic Gateway. And then I have a small 20 amp hour battery. If this was a prolonged outage, I can connect the 300 amp hour Redodo I have. Let me go ahead and kick the power back on again. And you can see that we're using about 4 amps continuous to run all of this equipment. Now, the last thing I'll say is I did experiment with 5 different ports. First of all was the 1200 baud packet port on VHF. For a short time, I experimented with a 9600 baud UHF port for packet access, and I found this not to be practical. One, you need a special cable for this. You need a special radio. This is the Yaesu FT8900 that has a data port, and not a lot of the handheld radios, at least none of the ones I owned, support 9600 baud. So I had no user base, and I also found that in practice, 9600 baud did not have the range that I got with something like 1200 baud. So I decommissioned that. There was very little value. Now, the other thing that I tried was Vara FM. Again, very little users, so I did not want to tie up yet another antenna. And then the one that actually worked out pretty well was Vara HF, Vara HF worked really well, but I had some issues with the application crashing under Linux because it was using Wine, and it was just too much of a headache. I did have a lot of users though come in. I'll throw up a map on the screen, but over the last 5 months, there was close to 47 unique users that either came in on the VHF packet pathway or came in on Vara HF. I even had some users come in over the 300 baud connection I have, which is actually running on this little 12 volt computer that's also connected to the power supply here. What I found in the time being a sysop is that I was responsible for maintaining all of this equipment for months on end, for over 5 months, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when I was running all of those services, I did not have any radio gear for myself. I had all 4 antennas, 2 VHF, UHF antennas taken up, 2 HF antennas taken up, 4 computers and 4 radios. So where I finally landed was I wanted to make sure that I had the most sensible tools that allowed people in the community to come in, but also allowed me to have my own resources. The other thing that was really important for me was this idea of community. I've used that a lot. If you guys want a drinking game, take a shot every time I say community. You'd be thoroughly wasted by the time you get to this point. But I'm trying to post a lot of content in terms of files and meaningful bulletins. We're using it to post our after action reports. I'm putting early access to scripts that would otherwise be online. So my role is to make it be a place people want to come to and build that community. So keep that in mind. Anyways, guys, this was a very long video. I have a lot more thoughts, but I don't want this to be a 1-hour video. So with that said, I'm the Tech Prepper. Be strong, be safe, and be prepared. And guys, if you want to see videos like this, I know the economy is rough. I really appreciate any support you guys can do on the Buy Me a Coffee side. I've got some perks. I've got the TTP Man Pack Bag V2 coming out in a very limited one-time release. And that's only going to be offered up to the top tier members. But I have other perks as well, like a member live stream. Anyways, cheers all.